Hey, Patrick.
Hey, Michael J.
So, Patrick, I have to kind of apologize. I thought that we wouldn't have more impact from Modern Horizons than we did from War of Spark, but I was wrong.
I think we've only scratched the surface, too. I mean, obviously, Modern Horizons has wasted no time busting Modern in half, but I also think there's enough, like, some of the busted stuff is so busted that there's actually busted stuff underneath that we haven't even gotten a chance to see how busted it is yet because of other stuff being even more busted-eder.
Wow, that's a lot of bustacular busts. But I don't even think this is any exaggeration, right? So you can barely get these packs, but they were released on Magic the Gathering Online and apparently are legal for Modern Challenge play because over the weekend we saw quite the new archetype hitting that top 8.
Yeah, well, to call it a new archetype is interesting because it is a new archetype in many ways, but it resembles some existing archetype, an existing archetype enough, and this is definitely that Hogaak, Arisen Necropolis new style of Bridgevine deck. But what's interesting is that even before Modern Horizons was legal in paper, Dredge has been such a high impact deck, like one of the defining decks of the past year, right? And even just a few days ago, Collins Mullen top-aided the SCG Invitational with a Dredge deck, which is pretty, archetypal, like the way that people have been playing it for the better part of the past year with Bloodghast, Narcomoeba, Prized Amalgam, Stinkweed Imp, Shriekhorn, Dark Blast, Cathartic Reunion, Conflagrate, Creeping Chill, Faithless Looting, Life from the Loam. What's interesting...
The burn Dredge deck is the way I kind of think about it, right? Because it's got like Creeping Chill to go to the face, Conflagrate to go to the face, not just, a creature attack based on Dredge creatures and kind of get stuff back with lands.
Oh, right. And this is definitely trying to space it out over the course of a bunch of turns, right? And it's just this inevitable plotting self-mill thing so that, in the first 5 turns, they're going to hopefully start being like way behind and you can just really get rolling when you have Loam online eventually. So what's interesting is that despite how much on the surface it might be like, oh, these are both Dredge decks, right? Well, that is extremely missing. Like, it's not very accurate at all to describe these as similar decks. To begin with, half the people playing Hogaak don't even play Dredge cards, and I personally think it's right not to.
Yeah, there's not even that much overlap in cards, right? Like, there are some.
Exactly. Out of the
both
51...
Bloodghast, right?
Yeah, out of the 41 non-land cards in this main deck, 4 Bloodghasts and 4 Faithless Lootings are the only cards I would play out of these cards. Now, some people play Golgari Thug, some people play Cathartic Reunion, but, like, the decks it's hard for them to be much more different despite how much they may seem conceptually similar. And the key is...
strategically so different. That's the thing.
They are so different strategically. So the Hogaak deck is first of all, it's a very benefited from Modern Horizons deck, not only because of Hogaak himself, and Hogaak, as a reminder, is 5 Golgari for a 8/8 that you can't spend mana to play, and you can play it out of your graveyard, and it has both Convoke and Delve. So you can exile 5 cards from your graveyard to get rid of that colorless part. You always have to have 2 creatures to convoke, though, because the Golgari you can't just delve for. So you have to tap 2 creatures that are black or green, at least, and exile 5 cards. And if you really wanted to, you could tap some more creatures and exile less cards. But in general, to bring this guy back, this 8/8 trample back, you're going to need to exile 5 cards from your graveyard, and tap 2 creatures. So, Altar of Dementia is a card that was printed in Tempest a long time ago that's back in Modern Horizons. It's 2-cost artifact. Sacrifice a creature. Target player puts a number of cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power from the top of their library into their graveyard. So if you have Altar of Dementia, you can sacrifice Hogaak to mill somebody of your choice for 8 cards. Now, this is particularly impactful both ways. I mean, you can, but for different reasons. If you mill yourself for 8, well, first of all, you know it's going to be super easy to spend the 5 to exile 5 cards from your graveyard to get back Hogaak, right?
That's cool.
So you can each time mill 8, pick the 3 best graveyard cards you want to keep, and exile 5. And in fact, once you get ahead a little bit, even if you flip over 5 graveyard cards, you could use up some of the old ones. You know, each time you're milling, though, your graveyard is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and you're getting to cherry pick all the graveyard cards to keep. But now the missing part, though, is that you need to have 2 creatures to convoke for Hogaak to create a loop. Well, the most easy way to do this reliably is with Bridge from Below. Because if you have Bridge from Below and you sack Hogaak, you'll get a 2/2 zombie.
That's with one Bridge from Below, right?
That's with 1 Bridge from Below, and you're not doing anything else. So that zombie is already half of what you would need. If you just had, for instance, 2 Bridge from Belows, you would need nothing else. You could just mill your whole deck, keep the 24 graveyard cards you want the most, and kill your opponent immediately, because you can also just you quickly find all your Bridges from Below, and you can start milling your opponent with your Hogaaks instead of milling yourself.
That's so cool.
You can just run your opponent out of cards. And even if they don't have, even if, say, they have Emrakul in their deck or something, you can keep 1 card or 2 cards or whatever in your deck and give yourself an overwhelming board presence. So, the Bridge from Below, though, it's not just that if you have 2 Bridge from Belows you can loop. Remember, if you have a single Bridge from Below, sacrificing Hogaak gives you a 2/2 zombie that if you wanted to, you could use to mill yourself for 2 more cards. Even after you, say you tap 2 of your zombies to play Hogaak, you bring back Hogaak. Not only can you sack Hogaak to mill yourself for 8, you can sack those 2 zombies to mill yourself for 4 more. So that's 12 right there. And the moment that you find another Bridge from Below, you can just mill your whole deck. And even if you don't find a Bridge from Below immediately, there's a ton of stuff you can do. If you have a Gravecrawler, if you ever flip a Gravecrawler, well, you can play Gravecrawler out of your graveyard if you have a mana available. All the zombie you got from Bridge from Below means you've got a zombie you can use. And Gravecrawler is interesting, or any other creature that you can play in this spot. Bloodghast, too. If you can still play a land, at the moment that you need to play a land, you just get back all your Bloodghasts. If it's a fetch land, potentially twice, right, which you can use to mill yourself a whole bunch more. Each time you sacrifice a Bloodghast, if you get back a single Bloodghast, you can sacrifice the Bloodghast, make a zombie, and mill yourself for 2, crack the fetch land, make another to get back Bloodghast again, sacrifice the Bloodghast again to mill yourself for 2, or you can even just you don't even have to sacrifice the Bloodghast yet. You can just tap the Bloodghast and one of the zombie that you have to play Hogaak, do the loop again, and then use the Bloodghast, sacrifice the Bloodghast, mill yourself again, get another zombie, and you can just mill yourself twice off of it. So, because each time you bring the Bloodghast back, you're able to tap it for Hogaak. And so, basically, if you find a Gravecrawler or a Bloodghast, you can look at so many more cards. And you can already, with just Hogaak, if you do it one time, you can, you'll have seen like a third of your deck already is milled, and if you find a second bridge, you go all the way. And if you find a Gravecrawler or a Bloodghast, you're milling a whole lot of cards, possibly 2/3 of your deck. If you just play 2 creatures in the same turn, though, you also get to bring back all your Vengevines. So the first time you play Hogaak, well, that is one time of playing a creature, and then if you bring back Hogaak and play Hogaak a second time, well, that counts as a second creature. That's the second time you've cast a creature spell.
So now you're getting Vengevines back too.
Right, so if you play Hogaak, sack it, mill yourself a bunch, and get back Hogaak one time, well, you'll have milled a third of your deck. If you find a Vengevine, any Vengevines you find you'll be able to bring back, which could potentially mill you for 4 more cards, assuming you don't just attack with them, right? You can use Vengevine to replay Hogaak. Each Vengevine is making another zombie for each bridge. So it's very easy to arrive at a state in which you mill your whole deck. Plus, whatever 2 creatures, sometimes you just play some creature, right? Like maybe you just cast an Insolent Neonate, and the Neonate lets you discard, draw and discard. Or Stitcher Supplier, which lets you mill for 3 on the way in. Then you sack it to the altar, milling for 4. Basically, you get to mill yourself a ton looking for a second bridge so you can just flip your whole deck.
I feel like, given the amount of library into graveyard manipulation you're talking about here, when you're hitting multiple bridges, especially if you've got like any of these setups that are allowing you to play multiple Hogaaks in a turn and or get back multiple Vengevines in a turn, it just becomes more productive to mill the opponent, right? Like it's just, you're talking about getting them for like just the cards I named. That's like 20 plus cards. And then you're also getting all of the, and then if you sacrifice those creatures with bridges in your graveyard, you're just getting some additional 2/2s which you can sacrifice in order to.
Well, you very quickly can get to 60. Yeah, you can very quickly get to 60, but you do have to mill yourself some, because in order to keep replaying Hogaak, you got to have a lot of cards in your graveyard to exile, and you're not even playing dredge cards anymore because this deck is so fast. So, part of what makes this strategy so busted is that it's very, very robust. The cards work really well all the other ways. Like, you don't have to just be doing the A game. It's B, C, D, and E game is all very good, very abusive. I was watching somebody play streaming the other day, and they're playing the Bridgevine deck. Turn 1, they just Faithless Looting, and they're going to present 12 power on turn 2. And there's a lot of ways this deck does super busted, anywhere between 8 and 12 power on turn 2 scenarios, right? Like, just to use a real simple one, if you Faithless Looting away of like a Vengevine and a Gravecrawler, for instance, something super low-key, right? The next turn, you could just play another zombie, such as Stitcher Supplier is a really powerful zombie, which maybe the Stitcher Supplier even flips over more graveyard action, right?
Hopefully,
and then the Stitcher Supplier is able to, and it's also, you could use Carrion Feeder, Gravecrawler, or anything else too. But whatever zombie you play there lets you play the Gravecrawler out of your graveyard, which lets you get back the Vengevine, and so you just have this big board, and you didn't even do anything yet. But you might be milling something else instead of Vengevine. I mean, you could be discarding 2 Vengevines, right? If you discard 2 Vengevines and then play a couple Gravecrawlers the next turn, well, that's 12 right there. And to speak about Carrion Feeder for a moment, Carrion Feeder and Altar of Dementia, both being new cards from Modern Horizons, radically change the way these decks play because they're both 0-mana sack outlets. These decks didn't used to have access to really high-quality 0-mana sack outlets. And in particular, Carrion Feeder is deceptively stronger than Viscera Seer for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's a zombie, which makes all the difference in the world when you're playing grave crawlers, right? But second of all, Carrion Feeder grows to become a very real threat. And this growing actually ends up mattering a lot, to say nothing of the possibility. Like, it might just be like a 10-10 or something, right? But even when it gets up to a 4-4, it matters. Because, like, if you anger the gods against somebody who's playing Viscera Seer, even if they sack their other stuff, you exile the Viscera Seer and you made some progress. But if you anger the gods against this deck, to begin with, Carrion Feeder will be big enough to live through it, so you still have your engine, part of your engine. But second of all, even if you didn't, this Carrion Feeder is allowed to sacrifice itself. Viscera Seer can't sacrifice itself. So Carrion Feeder can always dodge these exile effects by just sacrificing itself to fizzle whatever. Like if your opponent played Living End, you can sack all your cards to your Carrion Feeder every time. And generally just think Carrion Feeder is going to be a really big upgrade. But having access to so many zero-mana sack outlets is going to really change the way this deck plays out. So now, if you're playing with, in terms of just setting up these quick openings, when you have Bloodghast able to come back after you discard it to Stitcher Supplier or any of the self-looting stuff, Bridge from Below actually adds a ton of power to the table if you have a Carrion Feeder. Because if you have a Bridge from Below in the graveyard, your Bloodghast can make a zombie, then you can sack it to Carrion Feeder, growing the feeder, then sack the new Bloodghast to the Carrion Feeder, making a new zombie.
So, like,
Insolent Neonate can sacrifice itself.
If you've only got like one fetch land, a single Bloodghast with Carrion Feeder is worth like 5+ power, right?
It's worth 6 straight up. Because you're making 2 zombies and 2 counters on Carrion Feeder. So,
yeah, that's a lot.
And then Insolent Neonate, and that's a lot for 0 mana, out of the graveyard and 0 cards, spread out across several bodies. Insolent Neonate lets you sacrifice it, making a token for every one of your Bridge from Belows. And it lets you also discard a card like Vengevine, which some of these decks don't even play the ability to cast their Vengevines, but you just discard a card that's better out of the graveyard and draw a new card to keep going. So a single Bridge from Below can upgrade all these dorky 1/1s into 2/2s, even if you don't have multiple bridges going yet. And then the part of what makes this deck so powerful, actually, sorry, jumping backwards to that story from earlier, I was watching and they just go turn 1 Faithless Looting and they're going to present 12 power on turn 2. Just 2 Vengevines and 2 creature threats and so 2 Grave Crawlers. And their opponent goes, but they just went turn 1 Faithless Looting, and their opponent goes turn 1 Seeming Spear Guide, rest in peace. And this is game 1. This is not even sideboard. That's just how degenerate the modern format is now. People are just playing stuff like Simian Spirit Guide out my rest in peace. And it was a good thing he had the Simian Spirit Guide too. Because he had been because the opponent was on the draw, if they didn't have that Simian Spirit Guide, how much would the rest in peace have even done?
Yeah,
right.
I tweeted out a shot that somebody had shared on Twitter, I think just a day or two ago, where he had a rest in peace in his hand, playing Azorius Control, and it was already too late. Right, his opponent had taken a second turn, and he had kind of a silly amount of power in play already.
Yeah, I think that
he had
the graveyard hate is so different that's going to be good fast enough here because of stuff like that.
He had a Grave Crawler or 2 and a Vengevine in play and Hogaak in play, all on turn 2, and a bunch of those guys were tapped already. And so I think when you were just talking about the contrast between this new sort of Bridgevine, or kind of new updated Bridgevine deck versus Dredge, like Collins Mullins' Dredge deck is the kind of deck that's getting an advantage over the course of multiple turns, right? You're Shriekhorning for your free Lightning Helixes, and you're actually gaining card advantage with your Life from the Loam, and then you're kind of building towards something. Could be like a big Conflagrate, possibly from the graveyard, but like the fault points are very different, right? Like the Hogaak deck, it doesn't matter even if you have like I don't know, a Tormod's Crypt, right? Like even though Tormod's
Well, it matters.
Oh yeah, it might not matter if you have a Tormod's Crypt, even though it's really fast, because
It's not going to win the game for you at all. It's going to buy you a turn. So you better make sure you're doing something that is awesome, or else you'll just die one turn later.
because the exchanges are like contained within a single turn oftentimes with this Hogaak deck, right? You're just like, I'm going to do three things. I'm going to get an advantage right now. If you don't have a hate card right now, you know, I just build this tremendous amount of material, which is, and it doesn't matter if you have it later, right? Like, because I have this now, and my guys have haste. You know, Vengevine and Bloodghast can potentially have haste. And, you know, some of them are huge. Some of them are just like so card advantageous, right? Like Bridge from Below. And that's very different from Collins Mullins' deck, which is just like, I'm going to grind into an advantage over the course of many, many turns. I mean, obviously Collins is going to get a bigger advantage if given an unlimited amount of time, but you don't need an unlimited amount of damage. You only need to do 20 or mill 60.
So something I wanted to kind of point out that's like a weakness with Tormod's Crypt, and even more of a weakness with Surgical. Those cards can be used here, but they are shockingly poorly equipped for fighting this deck. So let me give you an example of a very normal thing that you can do with Hogaak. Let's say that your graveyard has two fetch lands in it, and the other and your opponent has let's say they have just a single creature, like a anything, a Bloodghast, doesn't matter, whatever. They have a single creature, and they have two cards in their graveyard. They're just a couple of fetch lands or something. Your opponent plays taps out to play Stitcher's Supplier. Maybe they have I think they need to have three in this to work. So let's say they have three cards in their graveyard, and none of them do anything. It's one Insolent Neonate and two fetch lands. If they Stitcher Supplier, are you going to use Tormod's Crypt or not?
Just into 3-0s? Probably not.
If you do that, if you flip over Hogaak, it's already too late. Because you don't have priority anymore. The person who played the Stitcher Supplier will have priority. They can take Hogaak out of their graveyard and put it on the stack by tapping both the Stitcher Supplier and the whatever one other creature they had, and exile all the cards in their graveyard, and now Hogaak is just in play, and there's no chance to use Tormod's Crypt.
And you even had your foil card.
Right, you had it already in play, and there's nothing you could have done there. Here's another example. And, you know, they don't even need so many cards in their graveyard because maybe they just have some amount of extra creatures or something, right? Here's another example. What if they cast Faithless Looting and they don't have any cards in their graveyard? What are you going to do? The Tormod's Crypt doesn't do anything.
I mean, you're obviously not going to use it in that situation. You know, you need
even if you have
data.
But if they discard Hogaak, they can play Hogaak without letting you have priority. It's not that Tormod's Crypt does nothing. It's just very hard to do. Surgical Extraction as well. The chances, there's a lot of times in which the thing you would want to surgical it's not even gonna work. And even if you do hit something, they have so much redundancy because their Vengevines are coming back, the Bloodghasts are coming back. They have all these little dorks plus all the bridge tokens, plus they can mill you out. The part of what makes this deck so busted, though, is that not only is it as durable as any of these dredge decks, it's much more durable, in fact. It's very, very, very robust. It powers through removal, counter spells, interaction, blockers, It's just
Blockers.
it's very, very not to be stopped by most forms of interaction. But what's more, it gets all the extra card advantage from all the cards in your graveyard function as if they're extra cards in your hand over and over again. It's so much faster that it plays like a legacy dredge deck. And in fact, in many ways, plays as fast as a vintage dredge deck. And it's having the speed of a Goryo's Vengeance combo deck while having the robust lack of ability to be interacted with in very many axes. There's nothing else in the format like it. And as if that wasn't enough, let's say they've got their ace wild card. There's very few cards that are so like over the top good against this strategy. Let's say they have a Leyline of the Void in play before the game starts.
All right, I like it.
Game one.
I like
you
it.
have no answers in your deck, and they got their pre-sideboarded best hate card in the format against you. Well, now your deck has 16 1-drops and some 2-drops, and you can just play them and attack with them. So if your opponent's like mulliganing aggressively to try to find Leyline because it will beat you, your deck has 20 beatdown creatures. Maybe you can even play Hogaak or Vengevine in some scenario, but it's going to be hard. But really, you have 20 beatdown creatures, and you can just attack. They're mediocre beats.
I mean, you literally have like 2 1-for-1, which is like basically a Jackal Pup, and 1/1 Menace for 1. Hey, at least he gets in.
And Carrion Feeder's no slouch. They have some tactical implications.
Carrion Feeder's a solid, sure.
Bloodghast has haste sometimes. People don't realize that. So, like, the point is that if your opponent tries to lock you out with Leyline of the Void, that's the most over-the-top best thing against you, you have your D game is pretty not that embarrassing. It's not like you want to show up with with 2 1-for-1 and 1 1-for-1 and so on. But like your opponent has to play some legitimate stuff, right? Like they can't just mulligan to their Leyline. They have to play a game where you will easily beat them.
Oh, sure. It's just like Jerry's Dark Depths deck from back in the day, right? Like you could mulligan real hard to repeal, try to take out that Marriage Lage token, but they're just going to beat you with Sword Combo or beat you with Jace, right? Those cards are also in their deck.
Right. So the fact that this deck's A game is breathtakingly fast, combined with its B game is so durable, combined with its C game, even when it's like locked out, like it's got all these things. Like if your opponent tries to bridge lock you, you can mill them out with Altar of Dementia. Right? Or if they play with removal, none of your cards, I mean, it's hard to remove your cards. And then
all the regular creatures just come back from the dead or are Insolent Neonate. Like a removal spell on an Insolent Neonate or a Stitcher Supplier is kind of wasted, right? Like that just gets you where you're going.
Right. So I think that the evolution, I really am drawn, and I wrote about this in my article this week, but I'm really drawn to the I see so many similarities to the Flash Hulk era when you could use Flash with Protean Hulk in order to create a Protean Hulk trigger that lets you search up some creatures from your deck. You could go get, like, for instance, a Karmic Guide and use Karmic Guide to get back the Protean Hulk.
Well, even Carrion Feeder, right? That was necessary to that combo, right? So, yeah, it was like Karmic Guide, Kiki Jiki, Carrion Feeder loop, right?
Right. And so by Flash Hulk being this busted turn 2 kill deck that people could speed up and use fast mana on to kill on turn 1, it completely warped the format around it where basically every deck had to be pre-sideboarded to have any hope at all. And so then there was this super weird inbred metagame of people playing tons of sideboard hate cards in their main deck just to try to have some chance. And one of the things that happened is that, first of all, the flash decks evolved by slowing down a little. Some of them, instead of playing, Elvish Spirit Guide to try to go faster, they would play with just like 4 Thoughtseize, 4 Duress, 4 Cabal Therapy, 4 Flash, 4 Daze, 4 Force of Will. When you have 8 0-mana counter spells and 8 discard spells that cost 1, you have just an incredible amount of ability to force through your interaction and take whatever hate card your opponent was going to play against you in general. And eventually, the eventual champion of Grand Prix Columbus, the sort of high point of that era, of that format, was New York legend Steve Sadin.
He's a Boston guy now, but yeah.
Now, sorry, yeah.
But we still embrace him.
Yeah, so East Coast legend Steve Sadin packing Billy Moreno's Flash Hulk counterbalance deck that was the Flash Hulk deck designed to beat Flash Hulk decks that were the Flash Hulk decks people played in that event. And so when I look at this format with how warped it is around Bridgevine, and everybody's just pre-sideboarding crazy amounts of hate, the Bridgevine deck might just be so busted that it doesn't even matter. And what you should really do is just main deck Leyline of the Voids.
Like you should just play Bridgevine with main deck Leyline of the Void.
Yeah, because first of all, it wins the mirror amazingly. Like, it's such a big advantage in the mirror. But second of all, and that's the only good deck, but second of all, it has a lot of interactions in Modern. It fights Tarmogoyf, and it beats Snapcaster Mage, and interacts with Knight of the Reliquary, and
Grim-Allomancer.
There's so many interactions, definitely. But what's more, even just for your own deck, if your opponent has a Leyline, if you have a Leyline of the Void in your opponent, they can never exile your Bridge from Belows unless they have token creatures.
Oh, that's sweet.
That's a really powerful, proactive, on-plan interaction.
Oh, that is that's like some free plot armor.
That's so strong. And remember, if they have Leyline of the Void only exiles non-token cards, so if your opponent does somehow put together a token, like a goblin token or something, they can lightning bolt their own goblin in order to exile your bridges, even if you have a Leyline. But like, for the most part, Leyline of the Void means your bridges are rock solid. So I think Leyline of the Void in the main deck is the future. But I think you should play Leyline in every deck, except, I think Relic of Progenitus is too slow for this format.
That is hilarious. I have a different take on this. So I'm bought in. I think this deck is probably prohibitively good. But I'm actually looking ahead to, there's going to be a Tabletop Mythic Championship that features Modern coming up pretty soon, right? I think that
after the ban list,
I think they're going to have to do something prior to that tournament, because the coverage will be miserable.
I think so. I think it's completely broken in half.
Yeah, I don't mind broken decks as long as you're playing Magic, right? As long as there's like tactical. I mean, actually not tactical. Strategic. I think this deck has a ton of tactics. I wouldn't take that away. Like, interesting strategic plan development, I'm okay with broken decks, because that actually leads to interesting narrative a lot of the time. But like this, a Hogaak deck, and especially like a Hogaak deck against a Hogaak deck for like 9 hours is not good TV. That's where I'm coming from. I don't think you want to have that for your big showcase event. There's so few now.
Yeah. One other, actually, before we lose track of it, one point I did want to also add about Leyline of the Void. Now that the London Mulligan rule is coming to every format, you're going to be mulliganing more, and when you do, you're going to be able to loot away a card or two, tuck a card or two. If, like, for instance, at the Mythic Championship coming up, they're going to all have each other's deck lists. Yep. You're going to know if you're facing Dredge. If you're facing somebody that Leyline is not good against, pick that as one of the cards you put on the bottom.
That is an awesome strategic implication. That's like an important thing to know, I think, with strategic mulligans from now on. Now, like, I remember the first time I saw a player, it was way back at U.S. Nationals 1999. I was watching John Schuler when he won the U.S. Open that year, and he mulliganed a completely, like a perfectly reasonable hand. And, he won the match, and I asked him afterwards, I'm like, why did you mulligan that hand? And he said he was playing against like a blue combo deck, and he said, mulligan every hand that doesn't have duress or boil. And I'm like, really? It's like, yeah. It's like, it doesn't matter if I keep 7 cards if I lose on the 4th turn. And he ended up winning the Open. So, it's even better now.
Yeah. So actually, another very, very powerful interaction that might be busted, that I think that if they don't take action before the Mythic Championship, there is another card that I think is going to come up into the spotlight a bit. And even if they take action on Bridge from Below, I think this card is going to be problematic or is very, very dangerous. Neoform from War of the Spark has new purpose because of Modern Horizons.
So before we get to Neoform, Patrick, I'm curious about this. I thought about what they should ban, if anything, and I think that there's a range, right? Like Bridge from Below is on the low end of the range. I think I would.
What do you mean the low end?
That like they could ban just Bridge from Below, or they could ban Bridge from Below and one or more cards from Modern Horizons.
I see. Yep.
And I've actually come around in my own head. I think they should ban all of Bridge from Below, Altar of Dementia, and Hogaak, which is like a big deal considering the fact that 2 of those 3 cards barely hit cardboard. Right? It hasn't even been
Why do you want to ban? Why do you want to ban Hogaak and Altar of Dementia?
I just don't. I want to take away the option as much as possible. I think Hogaak is horrible. It's a nice designed card, but the problem is
no, it's not.
When I say it's not nice designed card, I mean they got a lot of keywords on it.
I think Hogaak is too fancy. I think whoever designed this, they probably listened to very sophisticated music. I don't know. I'm not trying to take anything away from it. There's a story here. I just think that it's some future sight type of stuff where it's like somebody's like, okay, you remember how we made all those mistakes during Future Sight? Well, what if we just did them again? Because like one of the problems with Future Sight was that at one point in design, they were like, wait, what about, like, I think one of the designers was like, okay, all the stuff that we usually don't do because it would be a bad idea? What if it wasn't? Well, that doesn't mean it's not a bad idea. It just means you're doing bad ideas.
You're just doing bad ideas.
Right. Like
it wasn't a mistake. We did it on purpose.
So, I don't know. Hogaak, there's something here. It's a little fancy, right? It's definitely got a lot of fanciness going on. But either way, I don't know how much it's going to end up contributing to Modern. But it's a new card. I just think the bar is so high for taking action on a card that's been legal for a week.
So
my guess would be they have to do something out of either Altar of Dementia, Hogaak, or Bridge from Below. And since one of those is not a new card, but I don't know. I mean, Bridge from Below is not exactly adding anything positive to the format anyway.
It's not enough, right?
I don't think. Well, no. If it's not enough, I think Faithless Looting is like the most busted card in this deck.
I mean,
this deck is.
Faithless Looting has dodged a lot of ban bullets already, but the thing that I would say is there is nothing good. Nothing good will come of Altar of Dementia. Altar of Dementia is a 3rd turn kill card. It's like a historical 3rd turn kill card.
Oh yeah.
There's just nothing good for this. Like,
I don't think good things will come from Hogaak.
Legal in Modern? I mean, like, not that I think that you should necessarily play the Fruity Pebbles combo, but all the essential parts of that deck are legal, right? Like, Altar of Dementia, Ornithopter, and Enduring Renewal is there already, right? Like, no, wait, maybe
no, different one. You got to use like the Memnite.
Okay, Memnite. Sorry, yeah, because it doesn't have power. Okay, so Memnite, right. Altar of Dementia, and
Enduring Renewal.
Enduring Renewal. There, you've already got it. It's there, right? That's a 3rd turn kill deck already, and like 4th turn kill on the slow draw. And so it's there's just nothing good about it. Like I think that people love to play Modern, and they love to play Modern because it's often a great format. Sometimes not a great format. And I really I'm of two minds about Modern. I hate Modern when Dredge is the top deck, and I love Modern all the rest of the time, even when there's other challenging decks to beat. Like, but it's weird. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think that like the Dredge deck in some sense was like a triumphant design. I'm like, yeah, whoever you were that designed this deck with Shriek Horns and Creeping Chills, good job, good on you. But I don't think it's good. It's not good to play, right?
It's not a good gameplay experience.
Like,
no.
I love playing against Death Shadow, and that's like a really really good, structure. Death Shadow aficionados and aggro aficionados, they don't even agree on who has the advantage. Like it's so much planning, so much stuff can go on, right? You have so much space, even in a format that's like you gotta kind of do something in the first 4 turns or you're gonna lose. You still have space to think, and I think like the thing that I hate about this Bridgemine deck is there's no space to think. Like it's
well, there's a lot of sequencing.
Yeah,
but you're solitaring a lot, and the battles are not the kind of Magic that. I mean, first of all, it's super compressed. Part of the problem is that
sequencing, right? It's not you're not accessing the machine learning to improve the AI on this one, right? Like
no,
you're like, okay, I looked at my opening hand, you're
following an algorithm,
yeah, and that's it. And the thing is, like, there's so many things going on about like how robust your opening hand was and how not, like, it's just all these screenshots people are posting with their main deck rest in peace where they're going second are depressing me.
So Hogaak is, I think, very troubled for more reasons than just this deck. And I know you spoke to banning all 3, but Hogaak is a hell of a card to Neoform. Since you don't have to spend any mana on Hogaak, you can just get Hogaak back by exhausting, if you just exile, 5 of your cards. If you exile 5 of cards from your graveyard and tap 2 of your creatures, then you just have Hogaak, and you can sack Hogaak to Neoform to go get Grizzlebrand.
I like it. I like it in a sense that I don't like it at all.
That's really messed up, right? Like, you can just Neoform, and Neoform seems busted in the mirror too, right?
Well, here's the thing about Hogaak. Don't kid yourself, right? Hogaak has Convoke and Delve, and you can cast him from the graveyard. You don't have to cast him from the graveyard. Like,
no.
You could just have, he's just a green creature. Like, seriously, don't kid yourself. Doesn't matter that the left-hand side of the cardboard is black. Your elf deck can cast him and then just, set him up with some Simic Neoform nonsense, I guess.
Well, you can do a lot of things. Like, for instance, Summoner's Pact. You can just Summoner's Pact, go get a Hogaak. Play it for 0 on turn 2 or 3 or whatever. Neoform. Go get Grizzlebrand. And just play a deck that has Summoner's Pacts and Grizzlebrands and draws the whole deck with, like, Nourishing Shoal and stuff.
You're just off to the races.
Right. You're, like, Summoner's Pacting for, 15, the World Spine Worm or whatever.
Yeah, so to me, I like the availability of some of these Grizzlebrand decks, and I like them in like controlled amounts, right? Like if you have to watch one like every 3 rounds, it could be exciting, and you want to see like what's the matchup look like between this deck and like whatever normal deck the other player has. But like I think it is oppressive if everybody is playing Hogaak decks or just like stumbling through fighting Hogaak decks. Like
well, there's actually a lot of ways to Neoform on turn 2 for Grizzlebrand, not just Hogaak. Like, for instance, if you just pitch 2 green cards to your Allosaurus Rider.
Yeah, I'm okay with Allosaurus Rider. Like,
Well, there's a redundancy that happens, right? Like
yeah,
at a
but
certain point,
Allosaurus
you
Rider
just
makes you work. I mean, Hogaak,
does he?
Hogaak does the work. Yeah, I think so. I think like, especially when you're talking about London Mulligan, um, I think that the material investment required in Allosaurus Rider is meaningful. Right? There's 3 cards on the line in order to get to where you want to get. And so I respect that in a way that, that's I mean, sacrifice is the wrong word, but like there's just something there. Like Hogaak does the work for you. Allosaurus Rider says like, hey, we're working together here, but you're gonna have to put something in to get something out of me.
In terms of other stuff that people are playing right now in that modern challenge, the breakdown's really kind of interesting. There's a blue-white Planeswalker deck, but it goes lighter on the Planeswalkers than we've been seeing, just sort of out of necessity of the new world.
You talking about Soulstrong's first place deck?
Yeah, having Jace's, Narset, and both kinds of Teferis, but having Oust, and in addition to Path to Exiles, main deck Surgicals, there's, Fact or Fiction making an appearance here, some sweepers, and then sideboarding, Rest in Peace. Despite all this deck is not close. Yeah, you need a lot more. This is too slow.
So I was actually pleasantly surprised might be the wrong couple of words, but I'm like, really? This is the deck that defeated the Hogaak deck to finish first? I guess you get real lucky with those Surgicals in game 1. I guess that they're on the wrong side of the coin flip somewhere, because this deck does not look like it would be competitive to me.
Oh, I think it's a fine deck. I just don't think it has enough stuff. I think it's going to be disadvantaged.
That's what.
I don't think it's going to be disadvantaged. I mean, maybe you won the die roll. Like if you somehow got lucky game 1, then it's possible that a Surgical sometimes breaks things up just at the right time. It's possible the deck failed game 1. If you Rest in Peace on the play, you're in really good shape. A lot of decks in this event were either Tron, built around Karn the Creator, or Eldrazi Tron, built around Karn the Creator. And there's a couple interesting new twists here. The first thing is that Leyline, like for instance, Cherry X-Man, third place, mono colorless, but 4 Leyline of the Voids. Sideboarding 4 Leyline of the Voids, and I don't even know that you can't main deck them, but just out of the realities, despite the fact that this deck has access to Karn to find Tormod's Crypt, possibly Bridge in some scenarios, it's just, I think you need more, though. I don't think this is enough. And I think even Eldrazi Tron, not Eldrazi, I'm sorry, even like traditional Tron with main deck Relic of Progenitus, it's okay, but it's not very good. Maybe it's good enough to play, but I think that you're going to want to sideboard 4 Leyline of the Voids in your traditional Tron deck.
Do you want multiple Tormod's Crypts in this sideboard, just so you could just keep spitting them out with Karn?
No, I think by then it's too late. I think you get so much more mileage out of playing with one Grafdigger's Cage. And I wanted to actually mention, by the way, Grafdigger's Cage, despite the fact that it doesn't work against Bridge from below, is actually quite strong against these Bridgevine decks. It's not as strong as Leyline of the Void, but it's quite strong. It suppresses Bloodghast coming back, Gravecrawler coming back, Vengevine coming back, and Hogaak coming back. So shutting down 16 of the threats, it makes it so much harder for them to come back. But also, the more popular... So some people play green for Nature's Claim, but it's challenging. Nature's Claim has a lot of other problems, including not being synergistic with a lot of the other stuff you're doing, whereas a lot of people, like the second place finisher in this modern championship, play with Wismares and Ingot Chewers to be synergistic with all the Vengevines and all the other stuff they're doing, while simultaneously solving their problem that way. But if you had both Leyline of the Void and Grafdigger's Cage, Or if you had Rest in Peace and Grafdigger's Cage in your deck, then the possibility that they draw the wrong one out of Wispmere or the Chewer is so much greater.
Yeah. So they've only got this version, Needweeds' deck has only got 2 Ingot Chewers and 4 Wispmares, right? So I guess the Wispmares you're leaning harder against the combination of Leyline of the Void and Rest in Peace, and to some degree like Stony Silence, right? And Ingot Chewers more there.
Or Pithing Needle.
Yeah. I guess there's more things that you want to hit that are enchantments. So you got a 2-to-1 ratio.
Yeah, they're also just higher stakes. It's the Leyline of the Void stops everything, Yeah. And it's just so the thing that matters the most. Silent Gravestone is a really interesting graveyard hate card that can be used in these decks. Like some of these Bridgevine decks are playing it. So cards in graveyard, it's 1-cost artifact. Cards in graveyards can't be the target of spells or abilities. 4, tap, exile Silent Gravestone, and all cards from all graveyards draw a card. So you're not usually using this to exile graveyards, but you can, tactically. The big thing here is cards in graveyards can't be the target of spells or abilities. It shuts off Surgical Extraction, while also shutting off Snapcaster Mage.
Oh, that's a hot one.
It shuts off Life from the Loam. Like there's a lot of cards that it interacts with that are like it can stop graveyard hate against you while also stopping some amount of their own game plan.
Yeah, that's really quiet. I like that. It's very quietly gets an advantage for a very small amount of mana.
The use of mixing up stuff like Grafdigger's Cage and so on, that's going to be an important part. But there are some decks that are just trying to get by with being fast and proactive, and then just, have stuff like, maybe they have a mix of Ravenous Trap and Surgical Extraction or whatever. I don't think those are going to be even close. And I don't think that any of the hate bearer creatures are good enough at stopping graveyards to stop you here. I don't know that you couldn't play Yixla Jailer, by the way. But, one thing I wanted to mention about Grafdigger's Cage, by the way, is that it stops Neoform.
Oh, that's really substantial.
Yeah. Yeah. Plus, obviously, lots of other stuff, too, Collected Company, whatever. But I think that's going to be a big deal. So, despite how busted Modern is, that's not the only sort of topic of the day, right? Like, we just got our first glimpse into M20.
Yeah. 3 glimpses of the same person.
Chandra at 3 different points in her life, and I guess M20 is going to be a Chandra-themed set.
Well, there's so many Chandras. Is this the first 3 casting cost Chandra that we've had?
It is.
There's a creature Chandra is 3, right?
Yeah, but I mean, it's out of the walkers.
Yep. So the 3 shades of Chandra sort of from M20, we've got an uncommon Chandra for 4, a rare Chandra for 3, and then a mythic Chandra for 6. And I actually think that they've all got something going on.
Let's start with the uncommon and work our way up, man.
All right.
Because this is confirmed the only uncommon planeswalker in M20.
So Chandra Novice Pyromancer is 3 and an R, so 4 casting costs, like a lot of Chandras, but a little bit easier than most Chandras, for a 5 loyalty Chandra. Legendary Planeswalker Chandra, 3 abilities. +1, elementals you control get +2/+0 until end of turn. -1, add RR, and then -2, Chandra Novice Pyromancer deals 2 damage to any target. What are you seeing on this one?
So there's a bunch going on here. First of all, obviously this card is amazing in draft, unbelievable, right? Just the ability to shock 2 things.
Yeah, -2 is fantastic on this card.
Right. But from Constructed, my first guess is this isn't going to be good enough. But there's stuff. I mean, get 2 red mana has use so that you can ramp straight into 7. The -2 ability.
other 4-mana Chandras have had similar abilities as a plus, right? And this is
Well, this one's just a much lower rate,
Yep.
aimed to be an uncommon card. But if this card shows up in constructed, it's got to be because of the +1.
I agree. And perhaps as a result of like maybe the 3 casting cost Chandra into the 4 casting cost Chandra. You think that's a possibility?
So 3-cost Chandra Acolyte of Flame, is 1 red for a 4-cost legendary Planeswalker Chandra. The 0 ability, put a loyalty counter on each red Planeswalker you control, which would include herself. And if you played the 4-drop version, it would include her also. I guess that doesn't really work though. But you can. Yeah, it does work. You just have to play both and have them not be attacked. The 0 ability is create 2 1/1 red elemental creature tokens. The second 0 ability, anyway. Create 2 1/1 red elemental creature tokens. They gain haste. Sacrifice them at the beginning of the next end step. So this is obviously the ability you speak of, but presenting 2 1/1s a turn, it's kind of just, a 2/2 haste attacking, but across a couple bodies. But it gives you enormous synergy potential. Her elementals you control get +2/+0 ability is so good here. But also, if you just have sack outlets, if you have any way to turn those into something, or if you have things that trigger every time you play a creature, there's a lot of synergies and combos that are possible with that second 0 ability. Then finally, her -2, you may cast target instant or sorcery card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard. If that card would be put into a graveyard this turn, exile instead. So this ability can be tactically very interesting. First of all, you do have to pay the mana, so you're not getting to do it for free. But if you have the mana available, you can -2 this and just play like any 1 or 2 cost, whatever removal spell to your graveyard, or potentially a card draw spell or anything else.
It's like a mini Snapcaster Mage, but it doesn't require you to spend mana on that turn, right? The same way that a Snapcaster Mage would.
You're talking about for the 2 to start Snapcaster?
Yeah, so Snapcaster is like a 4 casting cost card, right? Because like if you get like a Renad with it, right, you needed to invest 2 to start.
Right. Chandra, you'd only need to invest to start if you try to do it the turn you play her. Because like if you played her and then played a shock, for instance, you'd have to have 4. But if you were willing to do it on any other turn, well, no problem. You can just pay 1 mana and shock out of your graveyard. And in particular, playing things that cost 3, you're just getting such a... I mean, you still have to spend the mana, but the range of options from having 1, 2, and 3 cost cards be eligible, it just gives her a lot of flexibility. This card, I think, is most loudly about that 0 ability, though, unless you're... it's possible you could find some way to abuse the -2. It doesn't work with stuff like Ancestral Visions, for instance. You have to actually really pay whatever the cost is.
So I actually think this card is pretty exciting for standard play. First of all, 3 casting cost Planeswalkers usually, require you to do a second look. And it's not just that Chandra is like good with the other Chandras from M20. Chandra Fire Artisan is a card that would really benefit from that first 0 ability of adding loyalty, right? And not for nothing, Nicol Bolas is a red Planeswalker, right? So,
true.
Like, getting to the ultimates on some of these other Planeswalkers that's not nothing when you're like, all right, I'm investing this on turn 3, and, I played it on turn 3, and then I'm going to spit some offense out, maybe have a reasonable expectation that my 4 loyalty Planeswalker lives for a couple of turns, especially if I get an untap. Like, you can get where you're going at least a turn faster, 2 turns faster, if you've got some interplay between Chandra and other key red Planeswalkers. And you're talking about playing in a color that is chock full of point removal. So,
good point.
I really think that and plus just that the second 0 ability is fine, right? So, if you're just
you don't think you want to build around that second 0 ability a lot?
I think that the other 4 mana Chandra that we were talking about a second ago, the uncommon Chandra, that I think there's just like kind of a clear nudge, wink, wink between these cards. Like, all right, I play this on turn 3, spit out some 1/1 elementals, and next turn I play my slightly more expensive Chandra, and then I make my elementals this turn, and then they're super big.
I was thinking, cool. even without the other Chandra, though, using that that second zero ability uh, in like a Judith deck is very powerful.
Oh
A
yeah.
lot of these cards talk about exiling the token. This one doesn't. This one's to sacrifice them at the beginning of the next end step. So it still works with like all the different death trigger stuff, and that's if assuming you don't even find some way to put it to use sacrificing it. One other note on that 4-cost Chandra we spoke of, she works with the changelings. So yeah, I don't know, but they're probably not going to put anything like that in standard, and she's probably not at a high enough power level for modern. But depending on how things go, it's not like a 0% that you could realistically imagine. My guess is that it's just not powerful enough in modern to be a consideration.
Oh, I agree. I think that if this card is even played Chandra Novice Pyromancer in standard, I wouldn't be shocked, but I'd be a little surprised. But I don't think that it's nearly good enough for modern.
So the real action is this 6-drop. Chandra Awakened Inferno. 4 red, legendary Planeswalker Chandra with 6 loyalty. This spell can't be countered. Her +2 ability is each opponent gets an emblem with at the beginning of your upkeep, this emblem deals 1 damage to you. So her +2 ability gives them an emblem that will kill them.
Yeah, it's like kind of like a Forsaken Wastes kind of thing, right?
Yeah. Her -3 ability, which is only half of her starting loyalty, her -3 ability, Chandra Awakened Inferno deals 3 damage to each non-elemental creature. So that's a pretty big game right there. Right? Like, being able to sweep the board that way, that's an awesome option. It reminds me of Liliana 6, right?
So if
she has
like nothing else, you have like a 6-mana investment for a 6 loyalty Planeswalker that gets you like 2 Deafening Clarions, basically. That's not a bad investment at all.
Well, and you can go Deafening Clarion, and then your opponent attempts to start recovering, and on your next turn, you could give them an emblem and tick up and do something about that threat, and now you're threatening to be able to sweep the board again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Besides, you can just put Chandra down, put an emblem on them, and now she's at 8, which is pretty hard to assail, and they're going to have to play into her sweeper in a lot of cases, and then you can just sweep that much harder. The fact that you can just keep giving them an emblem every turn, so they're actually taking 1, then 2, then 3, then 4.
It's awesome,
I can't stop it.
I love it.
So then her -X ability. Oh, and also, by the way, that -3 ability, I think the non-elemental part is not trivial. Depending on what other elementals they support, my guess is that if this is a Chandra-themed set, and all 3 of the Chandras reference elementals, there's going to be elementals in M20. And some of them are probably going to be priced to move.
Okay.
And maybe they'll work well with her. It could possibly be a drawback used against her, but my guess is that there's going to be some amount of reason to play them with her. -X. Chandra Awakened Inferno deals X damage to target creature or planeswalker, and if a permanent dealt damage this way would die this turn, exile it instead.
So Chandra is also like a planeswalker assassin.
Right. The fact that she comes down and flame tongues your opponent's creature or their planeswalker, and she has the ability to sweep the board. The fact that she can get it tall or wide makes it very hard to play against her on the table, And if you don't put anything on the table, her +2 ability is just going to eat you alive.
Oh, I think this card is really cool. And, we don't talk very often about, like, non-tournament formats, but, like, I can imagine this card being great in, like, a multiplayer Commander game, right? Like, you can't even recover from it at some stage, right? You just play it, and then everybody gets emblems.
You got to be careful. You got to be careful, man. They would kill you if you played a Commander. If you played this card and gave everybody emblems in a lot of Commander games, you would have a lot of enemies really fast.
I'd be dead soon, but they would all be dead too.
So, what do you think of Chandra Awakened Inferno? Where will it find a home in Standard?
I think this is a really exciting card. I think it's potentially... I think as a result of Teferi Time Raveler, it's not going to get that much action out of that first line. But I can imagine formats where that's a really, really awesome first line, where you just Think about it like historically. You have like non blue control decks or big red mid range decks that are playing into blue based control decks, and it's hard because their threats are big to resolve one through permission or like Vraska's contempt type stuff. That clause makes it so you now have inevitability. You're changing the script on them, and like I just think it's so substantial.
You don't think this card is gonna force its way through a lot of Dovin's vetoes and spell pierces?
And I don't think so. Because I don't think people are playing him as much.
See, I think Dovin's veto and spell pierce are so important for the Teferi Time Raveler matches
to make it so they don't have their Time Raveler.
Yeah.
I've just gone completely the other way. Like my blue control deck that I have in standard right now, I have like Thought Erasure in the main deck and Duress in the sideboard, and all kinds of Elder Spells and Vraska's Contempts, and there is not a negate to be seen. I just don't want to get locked, right? Yeah. Like you just gotta play a different game plan. I think I don't know. It's obviously great if you can spell pierce their Teferi, but it's really bad if you're in the mid game and you're just stuck, because you can't cast anything. You just keep drawing these reactive cards that just happen to draw in the wrong order. I think just to get back to the nut of your question though, Chandra Awakened Inferno I think is a really exciting card. I cannot wait to play this card at the top end of probably multiple different types of archetypes. And I think that Chandra Acolyte of Flame is going to be sweet. I think Chandra Acolyte of Flame is secretly best friends with Bolas. And we will see.
So here's a possible starting deck shout. And I'm most excited about her interaction with Bolas there, but as well. But in terms of just playing with the red planeswalkers, to sort of piggyback on that idea you were presenting earlier from Chandra Acolyte of Flame. No, at 3 you can play Chandra Acolyte of Flame alongside maybe Sarkhan 3. At 4, even if you don't want to play Chandra Novice Pyromancer, which I'd prefer to avoid, if you have access, Chandra Fire Artisan is quite good.
Yeah, it's great.
And at 5, Sarkhan the Masterless is fantastic in the Planeswalker deck.
Fantastic.
Absolutely. And then if you have 6 cost Chandra at the top, that's so much big stuff. Like, that is a very powerful strategy, And I think that the interaction between Sarkhan and Chandra 6 is pretty great as well. Just if you put down Sarkhan and make a dragon, the dragon lives through Chandra's deal 3.
Oh, that's sweet.
And I think that once you can play this many cheap planeswalkers, Sarkhan's going to frequently have access to, like, you put down Sarkhan and attack for 8 immediately and are presenting 12 more. So there's a lot to like with all that stuff,
Yeah, I'm not even going to ever get the chance to kill somebody with that emblem because the board that you presented is so good. Like, they're just going to eat 16.
There's also there's some interesting questions regarding what all you can do with planeswalkers in different ways, right? Like, for instance, I presume, presumably it's not going to be good enough, but if you use the new, if you use that Modern Horizons card that lets you sneak attack a planeswalker, well, planeswalkers that cost 6 are kind of interesting to sneak attack on the cheap,
So you could plausibly, sneak Chandra Awakened Inferno just to get the emblem and then win many turns later.
That's such a...
That's an expensive way to do it.
That is an expensive way to do it, definitely. So do you think people will play Chandra in any kind of control decks? Or is this just not really optimized for a traditional control deck as much as a board control deck or something?
Well, I can imagine Chandra... It's presuming you had enough red, right? So a lot of these control decks that can cast a red card don't necessarily have the resources to play 2 red on turn 3, right? So just take that with just a little bit of a note on that. Presuming you could get double red on turn 3, I can imagine Chandra Acolyte of Flame showing up in some of these control decks just because of the ability to put somebody on a clock, right? Like, if people are like, oh, I'm all sitting back on Narset, or I'm all, sitting back on Teferi. Just getting material in play and throwing it at people, not a bad option. Because she does put consistent pressure.
What do you think about Chandra 6 as a curve topper in some kind of a control deck? Or even a red-green deck with Llanowar Elves or whatever.
Red-green I can see. A control deck, I do like that -3 ability a lot, but, like, she's got some serious competition. Liliana Dreadhorde General is... I mean, obviously it depends on your color configuration, but if it's going to be a battle of 6s, Liliana Dreadhorde General, I think, is a better control 6, and Ugin even is a pretty good control 6.
I do like her in Planeswalker on Planeswalker Violence, though, right?
Like splatter that.
So, I don't know. I'd have to play with them, but I could imagine her being better than Liliana or Ugin. If she is, it's probably not by leagues or anything. And I could imagine her being worse, but I'd want to try her out. I could easily imagine some sort of a Nicol Bolas deck that goes higher to Chandra, or plays one Chandra, one Liliana, or whatever,
Yeah. I mean, can you imagine you have Nicol Bolas and then you follow it up with Chandra, and then you borrow Chandra's +2 to make a double...
Dude, you are all about this emblem.
It's hot. The thing is, like, the Nicol Bolas decks often give the opponent a ton of time, right? Like, you're not going to win. Like, you're probably not going to win. Because, like, Bolas's +1 is ridiculous, right? It's so disheartening. I've played against that card in Standard, I don't know, at least 4 weeks in a row on paper. I don't think I've ever withstood a successful +1. Like, I've won the match before, but I never win the game. Like, I have to beat them without them getting Bolas. It's really, really, they're ripping at your resources and they're killing you at the same time.
Here's one last note to leave you on to think about with the Chandra emblem that'll probably put a smile on your face. Your opponent's playing some sort of a Nexus of Fate deck, and you give them an emblem.
Oh, they can't win. They're just going to die. They deserve it. They deserve every scrap of it.
Life didn't work so great. Tried to play Dredge, so jailer hate. Ghostly prison waiting for my untapped phase. Your core trapped in amber stasis state. Lost a lot of friends, got left behind.